Beautiful people, welcome back to Miro Podcast. And I must confess that I'm always super excited to always show before your screen and just have beautiful conversations and honest conversation, most importantly, with you guys. But before we begin, I like to always appreciate you because all of these little things really count for me. You for listening, for sharing, for commenting, for supporting this podcast, every of your messages, your testimonies, and every reflections that you always share with me just reminds me why this conversation truly matters. And that's why I'll keep showing up. And if you're just joining me for the very first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. Here at Neuro Podcast, we don't just talk about life. We pause long enough to look at ourselves honestly because sometimes the hardest person to understand is not your spouse, is not your friend, is not your boss or your family member. Sometimes the hardest person to understand is the person staring back at you in the mirror. And who else? You are the one. So, on today's conversation, particularly this episode, right? I don't know if I'm going to make a part two of this, but for this particular episode, the title for this one is Don't Be a Foreigner to Yourself. Don't be a foreigner to yourself. I want to start with a simple question. How much do you actually know about yourself? I'm not talking about your name. I'm not talking about your certification. I'm not talking about your job title, your role, your social media bio. No, I'm talking about you. You. Who are you when nobody's watching? I mean, these statements, we don't want to sit with it because it makes us just think that who are we really? Who are you beneath your responsibilities? Or if these responsibilities are no longer there, who are you? Who are you beneath the expectation people place on you? If they no longer ask you or demand these expectations from you, who are you still? Do you see that? Can you ask yourself this question? Who are you beneath the image you've spent years maintaining? Because I've noticed something, and maybe many of us spend our lives becoming student of everything except ourselves. Did you hear that? We have spent our lives becoming student of everything except ourselves. In the course of the years, we have studied courses, we studied the market, we studied the economy, we studied the government, we studied relationship with others, we studied leadership, we study business, we study trends. We study people because you want to connect with them and then you have to study them. Yet we remain stranger to our own hearts. We can explain the personality of our friends, the people that we're connected with in terms of all manner of relationships. We can identify their weaknesses, their gaps, all of the loopholes because we've studied them so long that we know who they are. We can even predict the reactions of family members, of friends, of colleagues, but when it comes to ourselves, we often guess. We can't we can't tell. We can't answer immediately like we would mention our name. And that should really concern us. Because either you like it or not, you have to sit with this kind of conversation. Because one of the greatest dangers in life is not succeeding publicly while remaining unfamiliar with yourself privately. Think about it. How many people have big careers they secretly dislike? Because in this world, there's this survivor mode. How many people have spent years chasing goals they never truly wanted? How many people have become versions of themselves that everyone wants, everyone applauds, everyone demands shit, but they themselves, they do not recognize? All of these questions are rhetoric questions because I don't need you to answer me. How many people wake up one day and realize they've been living according to the expectation instead of their own convictions? We're trying to please so many people because we don't even know who we are. And all of these things don't happen overnight. It happens when you stop paying attention to yourself. And one of the most powerful gifts you can give to yourself is self-awareness. To sit down in solitude and you are all just by yourself. And I'm not talking about self-obsession where you are being self-centered and then you don't think about I'm talking about self-awareness that you sit down and pay attention to you. That I sit down in solitude and pay attention to myself. And the ability to understand what is happening within me instead of keeping quiet about it because there's a lot of noise in the world. We don't have time to sit down with ourselves and just pay attention. Do you see that? And the ability to identify your strength, your weaknesses, your triggers, your values, your desires, your fears, and your motivations. The ability to answer the question, why am I the way I am? I have learned that many people are shocked by themselves because they have never taken time to know themselves. So when people tell you, wow, you're so beautiful, you begin to cross check and ask yourself, how? Hey, you're not that sure. Someone will compliment you all of a sudden and you're surprised, you're shocked because you've not paid attention to who you are. Someone points out a gift and they are shocked. That, yeah, so you truly mean that I have this particular gift? So I have this talent. I don't know. Someone notices a leadership potential and you begin to dismiss it. You're like, no, because we have not seen it in ourselves. We have not believed in our conviction. And not because these compliments are not true, but because we have not spent in understanding ourselves that every discovery that everybody around us just discover about us, they feel like a news and we are shocked. Do you see that? Imagine meeting someone who has lived in your house for years, but you know nothing about them. That sounds strange, right? Yes, because that's exactly what we do when we live with ourselves. We live with ourselves without knowing. We're living in our body, we don't know ourselves. We carry the same mind, the same perspective, walk through the same belief system, walk through the same experiences daily. And yet we remain unfamiliar with who we are becoming. And the older I get in this journey of becoming, the more I realize that self-awareness is one of the greatest form of stewardship because you are trying to point fingers at people and picking faults and telling them, do this, do that. What about your own self leadership? What about your own self awareness? Because if you don't know yourself, you constantly allow other people to define you and it will affect your belief system, it will affect your identity. One person calls you incapable and you believe it. Another person calls you exceptional and you're surprised. Isn't that weird? Someone labels you and you wear the label because you don't know who you are. Someone misunderstands you and you begin questioning yourself. Why? Because you yourself haven't developed the clarity about who you are. And so you're second guessing every now and then to know who you really are. When you truly know yourself, people's opinion about you become an information rather than an identity. And this is not to say you want to just, dismiss people. You can listen without losing yourself. You can receive correction, criticism without becoming insecure. That's if you paid attention to yourself. You can receive compliments without becoming arrogant. You say, oh, thank you, because you are aware. You can grow without becoming confused. And one thing I deeply admire about mature people is that they have learned to observe themselves. They notice when something shifts. They recognize when they are exhausted and they talk about it unapologetically. They know when they need rest. And when they demand for that rest, even in the midst of people who are influential, they do not feel guilty about it. They know when they need solitude and they are not feeling like they're being self centered. They know when they are operating from fear instead of faith. They know when a season has ended and another has begun. They are not afraid to outgrow people or outgrow friendships. They're always paying attention to every details of their life. Many people are actually waiting for somebody else to tell them what's happening inside of them. We can be so lazy that we don't want to sit in solitude to pay attention to who we are. But these are things that God expects us to even discern for ourselves. There are seasons that announce themselves quietly. There are emotional patterns that reveal themselves, repeatedly. And there are also lessons that keep returning until you notice them. And if you are disconnected from yourself, you will miss all of it. Because God doesn't need to call somebody else to speak for you. And I think one of the saddest things in life is spending years introducing yourself to everyone else. Why never introducing yourself to yourself? I can speak so much about this because this has been my own part of life too. Because I realize that self-awareness is where growth truly begins. When you tell me this is who you are, I'm wondering how? How did I get that identity? Do you see that? How can you improve what you refuse to examine? How can you even steal what gifts you haven't recognized yourself? How can you set healthy boundaries when you don't even know what matters to you? How can you pursue purpose when you don't even understand your own design? Knowing yourself isn't optional. That's the very foundation of growth. And this is why you have to reflect, have introspection, have interrogation with yourself. When people give you constructive feedback, It's for you to go back and sit down in solitude and begin to reflect over them. Not brood to make yourself feel sad, but the ability to sit with yourself long enough to listen to your heart, to ask questions, to do some soliloquy, to introspect, to begin to notice all of these patterns, to examine your reactions, your triggers, your trauma, to understand your desires, to process all of your experiences. Some of us are so busy and understand the world that we are. Everyone is trying to just survive. But the moment when you understand that something is at stake, you will sit down with yourself and introduce yourself to every part of yourself. Growth requires us having meeting, personal meeting with ourselves. You cannot become who you are called to be while running from who you currently are. And for those of us who are believers, self-awareness becomes even more powerful when it is connected to identity in Christ. Because there are two mistakes we make. Some of us define ourselves only by what we feel. That's not what I'm talking about. And others define themselves only by what people say. Neither of these two is sufficient. No. But our identity is rooted in what God says we are. Whatever God says that we are is what we hold on as anchor. Because even maturity, when you're growing, it requires understanding how that identity expresses itself uniquely through your personality, your gifts, your experiences, your calling, and your journey. And that is where clarity begins. And all of these things that I've talked about this evening, it won't really make sense to you if you're not intentional about your own journey and growth. You won't pay attention in spending time to know yourself because you feel it's boring, it's not necessary. But if you truly want to get to that version that God has called you for, oh, that version that is going to become that the great thing that the Lord has said concerning your life, you have to sit with yourself long enough. You have to pay attention to your patterns. You have to ask yourself difficult questions. You have to journal your thoughts. You have to reflect on your experiences. Thank you so much.